This is deliveranceministry.fm VideoCast number 25. Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to this episode of deliveranceministry.fm, where we give you proven insights about the demonic realm and deliverance ministry so you can wage spiritual warfare more effectively. Hello, this is Dr. Don Ibbotson, and here with my co-host and colleague, Dr. Phyllis Tarbucks.
Hey, Don. Good to be here.
Good to be here indeed. We're looking forward to this session, and because it's about a topic that we encounter quite a lot in the counseling center, and we're going to examine the realm of, if you like, or the topic of depression. It's a very common affliction that people come in to meet with us. That it seems to be a common thing in their life, and part of the issue, and it's very important to get to the root cause of the depression.
Absolutely.
And it's pervasive in this country. The fact that so many people have depression. It's research, and recent research has found that anywhere between 5 to 9% of adult women and 2 to 3% of adult men in the United States suffer from what is called major depression at any time. And so we'll talk about, there's different clinical diagnoses on different things about depression and how it's diagnosed and how the medical profession looks at that. But we want to talk about that in more depth and just look at the example, or look at the realm of, or the field rather, of depression. And let's begin by saying, before we get into the main topic, that depression is an emotion, right?
That's right.
It's part of our soulish realm, our soulish man. And we'll see it we talked about that in different podcasts about our body, soul, and spirit, and that we have a soul that's not born again. But it is an emotion that we have, and different times we feel sad. But the question we want to explore in this topic is it possible that there's demonic torment at work? And how can you tell if it's just an emotion of sadness that you're experiencing, or whether it's true demonic, or depression, if you like, from a demonic stronghold standpoint? That's what we want to focus on today.
Well, I think sadness is fleeting too, isn't it, Don? I mean, it comes with events or things that are happening to us. Depression comes when you've been meditating on that loss for a long period of time and you can't get the victory over it. It's something that just keeps you stumbling, and you enter that depressive state, and it becomes basically what overtakes you as far as your mood. You know, you walk around, I call it Eeyore state, sad, lonely, depressed, that sort of thing. But it's much greater than just a temporary sadness from an event. Well, it is. And
once again, as counselors and deliverance ministries, we want to look at it from a spiritual standpoint as well. And that's what we're focusing on here too. It's important to understand, and we see that the Bible is full of what we would say people who seem to suffer or were tormented by depression. There's an account, of course, one of the most comprehensive books in the Bible in terms of somebody who just had a major depression because of things in their life was the book of Job.
All right. He lost everything. So yeah, that would bring it in. Children, family. His whole household was gone, and all of his livestock, and so great loss was incurred by him. And I'm sure that you could tell by what he was meditating on and what he was saying, there was something there, right?
Exactly, absolutely. Elijah as well.
Yeah, because Elijah, he hid in the cave. He hid in the cave from Jezebel until the food source ran out. And of course, the question was, why are you here? Why are you still hiding in the cave? And, he had to really grab himself up, probably from a real sinking, defeated, I didn't win, I didn't finish what I was supposed to do, and get up and start moving. And it took the prompting of God to get him going again.
Absolutely. We also see the encounter in 1 Samuel 16, verses 14 through 23. It's about Saul. Right. And it talks about, and starts off with saying that because, David had been anointed king, or was to be king of Israel, and it said that the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit tormented him. And that's in verse 16. And then Saul's attendant said, well, look, let's get somebody to come to you, who can play the harp. And then they will play play for you when the evil spirit comes upon you, and you're going to feel better. So that's how David really got in the mix, and we see David did come and play, and Saul liked him very much. But that the point we want to focus on in there is that there seemed the word used that said that there was a spirit that tormented him. And it's very likely and it doesn't say explicitly, then maybe that was a spirit of depression.
Yeah, he was about to lose the kingdom, right? The Lord had departed from him. The Spirit of the Lord had departed from him. So I'm sure he knew that his days were numbered and he wasn't going to be moving with that favor any longer. So I'm sure he was sad and depressed. Yeah.
He was. So once again, that's where we really see very explicitly use the term of a spirit of depression, a spirit of some kind
of spirit,
an evil spirit, a demonic spirit that was tormenting Saul. So I guess the question that's worth asking, even as we start out here, is what is, if you like, normal depression, or what is what we would classify, what is normal or in the Soulish realm when we talk about depression? Because when we talked about it in other podcasts about the whole body, soul, and spirit model, we get born again, we get saved, we don't get a new body, we don't get a new soul. And in our soulish realm, where our mind is, there's a lot of mind battles that go on there. And so what is, what do we want to share with the folks in terms of a definition of depression that might be helpful for them to wrap their arms around?
I looked it up. I looked it up on Wikipedia, so I will read it to you and what it says.
Source of all sorts of great knowledge, Wikipedia.
Yeah. It's a state of low mood and aversion to activity that can affect a person's thoughts, behavior, feelings, and sense of well-being. People with a depressed mood can feel sad, anxious, empty, hopeless, helpless, worthless, guilty. Boy, there's a lot to this one, huh? Irritable, angry, ashamed, or restless. They may even lose interest in activities that were once pleasurable, experience loss of appetite or overeating, have problems concentrating, remembering details, or making decisions, experience relationship difficulties, and may contemplate or attempt suicide. Insomnia, excessive sleeping, fatigue, aches, pains, digestive problems, or reduced energy may also be present. Well, I think that just about covered most of our stronghold list, didn't it? So depression.
And a lot of people are probably listening to this saying, man, that's me right there.
Yeah, there's a lot that feeds into depression. So depression actually could be the end result of many of these things just combining themselves. And then that spirit of depression comes in, especially with sickness and loss.
Well, it is, and there's a lot of things that happen. I mean, you talked about sadness. I mean, things happen. We can, people can be sad. There's things happen, or it's going to be as trivial as their, hockey team or football team loses, or their dog dies, and there's sadness that happens, and there's depression and things that can happen in that realm. But it's usually fleeting, right? It's and I think that's the main thing. And we see a lot of people here who just have battled depression, like literally all their lives, and sometimes they can't even put their finger on it. And those, where we want to get in the realm of understanding, well, we touched on it already, that in the realm of deliverance ministry, that there can be spirits. There can be, and we'll say categorically, we operate with a list of spirits and strongholds when we minister to people. But one of the spirits that we talk about explicitly and call out explicitly is the spirit of depression. Now, we put that stronghold of depression we place, for our purposes, that spirit of depression underneath, or if you like, below the strong man of heaviness. And that's kind of what we consider to be the ruling spirit over depression. Among others, there's guilt and shame, self-pity, loneliness, and whatnot, rejection. And that's where we tend to have it. But there can be, and I think this is where people need to understand, is there is depression where we feel depressed and we get, it's fleeting, but there can be instances where there can be a demonic stronghold of depression there. And as we like to say, we're not going to go over all this ground now, but if you have a demonic stronghold and a spirit behind it, then really the only remedy is to get delivered from that spirit.
That's true. It's just not going to get up and walk away on its own.
It's not going to walk away on its own, and people, for different things. I mean, there's all sorts of books out there about positive thinking and going to your happy place. And those are techniques, and they're valid. They can help recovery. They really can. And I think what we want to talk about is you're listening to this and say, well, is that my issue, or is it something deeper than that? And so we want to kind of migrate into the discussion about evidences or indicators that a person may have a demonic stronghold of depression. And once again, before we get into that, we want to be clear that deliverance is the driving out of demons, and people can have spirits inside of them in their soulish realm, and among those spirits, one of them can be a spirit of depression. So Phyllis, what do we tell people? What are indicators or evidences that there may be a demonic stronghold of depression at work?
Well, before we even get to that point, though, I just want to make one point about depression, because in the United States, I got to tell you, there is a very large territorial trauma that happened to this country that was based on the Great Depression, right? I mean, anytime you have people walking around saying, I lived through the Great Depression, or I am depressed, or anything like that, that really opens up a door. Any kind of loss is going to open up a door for depression. And of course, that was a great economic loss back then with the Great Depression. And we've talked about this some before, but anytime you have a sweeping movement like that across the country where so many people are affected by that type of a loss, and those kind of words are associated with it, then the enemy is going to capitalize on it. So I don't know about your parents because you're from Canada, but over here, my mother walked around saying, oh, we lived through the Great Depression.
No, same thing in Canada,
okay.
Absolutely, yep.
Yeah. And so as that went on, then the next generation comes. Now, that's me. I didn't struggle with great loss or financial loss like they did. We've been very blessed. But I have to tell you that I struggled with depression. I mean, when I came in for deliverance, that was one of the ones in my bag. That was one of the things I had to get through. And I'll tell you what, the kids that are coming in now, it's like the next generation, the 20-year-olds. I've even had the 8 and 9-year-olds in here that are on depression medicine. So I believe that this is like a generational iniquitous structure set up over the great United States where the enemy has brought that down. So it's, something shifted back then. And this spirit now knows our name, and it comes in and it can torment the generations because it affected our forefathers. So I believe from a generational perspective, depression is something very valid that we could have been born into our family. And it may look different. It may look different for my generation, the next generation, than it did. So I don't know that we necessarily connect the dots and identify it because, like I said, my mom struggled with financial loss, but I had a lot of other loss, but it's set up exactly the same way. And so that's what the enemy does. He repackages a spirit. But it's the same spirit. Maybe he repackages the way it gets in, but it's the same spirit. So look back in your family and see if those words were something that your parents spoke over you or over the family, that we were all depressed and we had lost everything. And I used to hear the stories. We went door to door selling canned goods for a nickel a can, because they'd lost everything. So it was pretty widespread.
Well, I think, right, exactly. And I think that we've talked about it in some other podcasts about what these sort of generational curses and curses upon the land. And at that time, that in that what we call the Great Depression, that there was a spirit of that at work there over the country, over the land, and occurred in other parts of the world as well. But that spirit is kind of propagated over time, and as you say, entered into people, and then they've embraced it. They talk about
they've owned it.
Well, my depression. You'll hear that even now. People say my depression.
Well, there's that commercial. Have you seen that commercial? The commercial on TV for some of the depression medicine. There's a little umbrella that's in the corner, and it's called My Depression, and it follows the lady wherever she goes.
No, I've not seen that. Wow.
It's horrible. I hope they take it off the air.
Well, and that's it, and that's the power of the tongue. There's
life and death.
We speak things over ourselves in my depression, but I guess the notion is that there can be all this is to really hone in on the fact that there can be a spirit behind depression.
Absolutely.
And so for us, we say, well, when somebody comes in and the first session we have an interview, a lot of times we will hear from people that, they've battled depression, they've had it, and they've tried different things. There are some of these positive thinking and mind technique things.
A lot of self-help stuff.
A lot of self-help things. And people sometimes have had counseling, they've had prayer, they've gone to the pastor, they had ministry for it if they're brave enough to go in and confess to being depressed. Because sometimes you get beat up in the church. Well, you just need the joy of the Lord, sister or brother. Where's your faith? And it's like, so you get depressed about, confess or bringing forth the fact that you feel depressed. Well, you shouldn't be depressed. And so sometimes the church ends up beating people up in that regard. I've seen. And so, the other element though, as we know, is in the world view, you go to the doctor and you just mention depressed many times. And
boy, they write out that pad right away, don't they?
They seem to want to bring out a script and write a script for you. And we've had, just so many people in here. And, at the heart of it, Phyllis and I have seen, and I'm sure you have too, that literally the thousands of people we've seen, there's, I can recall maybe, the number of people on one hand with fingers left over who really are enthusiastic about their medication. This medication has really helped me.
Yeah.
It's really fixed the problem. Yeah, I couldn't have, most people by and large, they're taking it, but they recognize it's not a cure. It's a Band-Aid. They don't like the side effects, almost a very.
Oh, they're very large. Yeah.
They can be, and they're doped up and they're dumbed down. And so, I think that what, the view is that we have seen from people is that the medical solution doesn't work for depression because it's really not a medical problem.
Right, because it adjusts the serotonin levels in the brain and the other chemicals that are off balance. So if a person is extremely depressed and their body is out of whack chemically, oftentimes they will need some depression medicine just to get back up and get a little bit of balance to come in, to recognize, okay, that's helping that piece of it. But what caused my levels to go off to begin with? Was it fear? Was it loss? Was it some sort of trauma? Because you're right, that doesn't go away. So you can medically get some temporary help, which, I have to tell you, really, when I came in, I was on something like that. But after I went through deliverance, about nine months afterwards, it wasn't right away. Everything started to balance out, and I just recognized I didn't need it anymore. And that was the beautiful part, because we never tell people here to get off their depression meds. We don't do that because chemically that's something that you have to walk out with your medical doctor. But with deliverance, we get down to the root of it, and then you don't need it anymore, because once your chemicals are balanced and you're feeling good and your immune system's working right, and then your mental emotional state is better, then it all just kind of clicks. And then the joy for me, it was easy. I just said, I'm good.
Well, exactly. And I think, the way you outlined it is the way our approach. If you're listening to this and you feel like we're beating you up for taking depression, please, that's not the point at all. We're not saying that at all. It's just, I love, praise God for doctors. Luke was a doctor, and there's great things in the field of medicine, but in the whole realm of a lot of the emotional realm with these psychotropic medications, whether it's for fear or depression or many other things, it's just, they're not really issues. And say, well, don't you believe in chemical imbalances? I said, well, yes, I can see they can do the test and say certain levels are low and high, but I'm going to submit to you that that's more a symptom of the problem.
Exactly.
Than it is the problem.
Exactly.
And they treat the symptoms. And so what you said was so important. When you get delivered from the strongholds, and then the body will follow in behind what's happening in the soul, the levels can stabilize, and you say, and then they can work in conjunction with their physician to say, I want to move off of this. And most people I know, they will work with you. Doctors aren't bad people. They don't necessarily always push.
Oh,
things.
No.
They want to work with, they want to help you. And so if you're open and that can happen. And that's the encouragement that we want to give, that after deliverance, you can.
I had a doctor that I work with over in the Tampa Bay area who came in for her own self, but then she came back and said, listen, I want to learn more about what you do and even go through the process, because I treat patients daily for depression, and they come in and they just want me to take my pad out and write them a prescription. And I always want to say to them, what is it that's making you depressed? Let's get to that. We've got to work on that, not just, put this Band-Aid over it, like you said. And I was so encouraged by that, to see, someone with a sensitive heart like that, as a believer in the medical community, come in, put herself through deliverance so that she could understand it, so that she would have a place to recommend, as far as, different forms of healing, not just a Band-Aid. She said, it just grieves me to write a script and send them on their way.
And I too have had a psychiatrist, a Christian psychiatrist, come through for deliverance, and said the same thing. I said, I realized many times writing these medication or scripts for medications that these are really spiritual issues that need to get dealt with. Why are you depressed? That's it. Why are you depressed? And sometimes people need help winning the mind battles and have right thinking and get their thoughts lined up with the Word of God. But many times people have tried that and they can't get the victory. They're doing the things. They're in church. They're getting prayer. They're getting counseling. And those for us are all evidences or indicators that a person could have very like a demonic stronghold of depression or a spirit of depression at work in their life. And that's the bottom line is, there's no, just something you could administer with a checklist and, come up with, say, oh, yep, definitely that's what it is. But there's evidences and indicators that point to it. And those are some of them that you get, you've tried the medicines and they're just a Band-Aid. You've got counseling, you've had prayer, fasting, been to seminars, read books, and can't get the victory. Then maybe you should be open to getting deliverance for depression.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
good.
Yeah. And I think, sometimes we hear from people, and it's a realm of depression, but it's could be other issues as well. And I always get encouraged when I hear this. Some people comes in and they don't know what the problem is, but they'll say, it's not me. It's just like it's something in me.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too. And they feel it driving them. Right?
They feel it. They don't know what the it is.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very encouraging to be open to say, look, it's a spirit, a demonic spirit behind. That's the it that's there. And, let's get rid of that. And so our process, we minister to people. We just don't go for one spirit. We try to get them prepared and call out and take them through deliverance to get free from a lot of things, of which depression can be one of them.
Right, because they link and they network together. So it's going to try to keep a person down, especially with that list from what we just read from Wikipedia. You can see there's a lot of things that play into it. Certainly sickness. I mean, that's a big thing. Loss of activity or loss of a job. Those are all very large things. Family members, loss of a spouse. We see people holding on to the past that come in for that sort of thing. And so, if it goes on too long, I mean, there's a time for everything. There's a time for grieving.
There's a season, right?
There's a season for that. I mean, Moses only had 30 days before he had to cross over, right? Or, they only had 30 days to grieve Moses' loss before they crossed over. But I don't know. This is good. This is good. Abraham. Got that one wrong. Sorry. Go ahead.
All right, Abraham. That'll work. And I think it's important to have for some contrast here. We're talking about deliverance and strongholds. And once again, just to emphasize, there's not spirits behind every problem in a person's life. And that's certainly what we have. People can be depressed and feel depressed, and, some of the mind things can help. But gosh, that spirit, if it's there, then the only remedy is really, going through deliverance. And we've had people come through who gone through and getting off of their medications, working with their doctors to do that. And then, as you said, and it's so important because of the linkage between the body and the soul, when you get free from the spirits and the soul, a lot of the physical and so-called medical physical issues and healings can come.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We've had some people that have come in. I know that one of the ladies came in that she had just grown up always depressed, never really, she grew up across the waters, but always having a weight of heaviness and sadness on her that was not necessarily identifiable, but she had great losses and never seemed to get what she wanted and was treated harshly. She was treated more like a slave and her family members. And even when she started to get all of the things that she wanted in life, after she finally found and married the right guy, and then she was still depressed, and she came in for ministry. And but then she found that even after she had a child, and that was the great desire of her life, that spirit of depression wanted to come back. But it was something generational in her family bloodline. So that was something that had to be commanded to go, because it didn't seem to matter what state she was in. She was always in that place of what I want, I never get, even though she was getting it all. It seemed to always fall short. There was always something that came in with torment. And that was the word she used, to come in to steal her joy. And it was systematic. So we could recognize that as a pattern. That's typically what the enemy will do. It's like you're in a play, and it's the same play, but with different people in different seasons of your life. And that's what it was with her. I've also had a lot of understanding, like people that are very self-meditative, like people that think internally, deep thinkers, analytical thinkers,
melancholy
temperaments. They tend, you can get into some self-pity. And I think, honestly, Henry Wright talks about this, but he says that self-pity is the bond or the glue that bonds you to hell. And I really think it does, because I think that self-pity, when you focus on yourself and you think so much of yourself and what you're not getting or what you should be having or what you've lost, it's hard to say, but it's selfishness. It's self-pity. And it's rooted in a spirit of pride, because you're focusing more on yourself than you are anyone else. And boy, I tell you what, that spirit will come right in with depression if you're really just meditating on yourself an awful lot. So, I've had people that have come in with that, and I prayed for them to break any spirit of self-pity. And when I called that spirit of self-pity off of them, two of them in a row just collapsed right over like a rock, like a thud. And then, we were able to call out the other spirits that came in along with it. But yeah, that self spirit is something else. But some things that I've also seen that are interesting, Don, people that come in, that are from large families, or they've got working parents, where there's younger siblings, the firstborn child seems to get stuck with some of the responsibility for child raising. And you'll see if that starts really early on, like at say 5 or 6 years old, there's this mothering thing that they take on where they have to mother. And that ungodly responsibility that comes on them early causes them to feel like a failure, like they couldn't, they didn't do it right. It's because the siblings don't usually end up perfect if you're being raised by a 6-year-old. That failure thing comes in, that sadness comes in that they didn't, and then that spirit of depression comes in, and you'll see children who have to pick up ungodly mothering at a very early age. They're depressed as adults. So if you because a lot of times what we'll hear in counseling is, I don't know, I've just had this overwhelming spirit of sadness ever since I was young. And one of my clients even brought me in a picture of her at like 13, and she was sitting there with all of her siblings, and she looked so sad. I mean, all of them were smiling, and she was so sad. And she said, see, I was even sad at 13. And I said, well, you had 4 siblings that you raised for your mom while she was, and she goes, yeah, I had a parent full time for my mom. And she said, I never had any fun. I never got to have any fun when I was little. And so we knew the root where that spirit of depression came in, because she wasn't allowed to be a child. So that was a hard one.
Well, when people try to deal with it different ways, that's kind of responsibility. Sometimes they'll try to self-medicate.
Sure.
They'll cover that or bury that sadness in alcohol. And maybe as an aside, because, it talks about that it seems to be a greater problem generally in adult women than men. This whole issue of postpartum depression.
Oh, that was a big one for me. Yeah.
Well, you hear it about it a lot, and we're not a medical person here, but maybe some of that's, there's dynamics to that. Maybe
there definitely is. Well, it is, because a woman's chemicals all go sideways. Yeah, your hormones all go sideways. I didn't sleep for 4 months after either one of my children. And so, yeah.
But sometimes it just stays, right? I mean, those are,
yes.
So what might be a physical thing and getting the hormones out and back in balance. And usually for most people, it kind of passes, or most women, but many people that just, it seems to linger even after the normal, what would be a normal time.
Yeah,
so
because
those
it's
are
a
the
huge lifestyle change too. That's
right.
why, yeah.
So any number of
indicators. I have one more story too that's pretty interesting, I think, with depression. One of my clients was very, very joyful as a small child. She always remembered herself being extremely happy and very joyful. But her mom had said over the pregnancy that she was miserable being pregnant. Her pregnancy was miserable. And then when this little girl was born, the mom constantly told the little girl, "You're just miserable. You're a miserable little girl." And the little girl said, "I'm just a happy little girl." She was real happy.
She was cursing her.
She was really word cursing her. And so she said that she remembered she was in like 4th or 5th grade. And about that time, she was at school and she was really happy. And then all of a sudden it just hit her. I shouldn't be happy. I should be miserable. And it was at that moment, she said, she came into agreement with the words that were spoken over her, and she became miserable and depressed and sad. And so, anytime you speak over your children with words like that, they've got to be broken, because the children eventually will probably come into agreement with you as an authoritative parent, right? And those words.
Well, and as we say, people will speak it over themselves. They hear about my depression.
My depression.
They will take ownership of that. It's like, that's who they are. No, it's not yours. It's like, that is not a good way to speak, because you're speaking a word curse over yourself.
Or I am. That's two powerful words. I am depressed. I am,
Right.
That's not good.
And a lot of that, I think, just comes from improper understanding of the spirit realm and who we are in the natural realm and our relationship to it. You know, that we are in Christ more than conquerors, that Jesus has won the victory over the demonic realm. One of the reasons he came was to destroy the works of the devil. So if it's a demonic stronghold, deliverance is the answer, right? You can't counsel demons out of people. People have come from deliverance and they've been in counseling for depression and other issues for years, but they do not get the victory. So if there's a spirit of depression there, then you need to get delivered from that one way or the other, either in a common ministry or some way, somehow getting set free from that spirit of depression.
Right. We can work with people in counseling a whole lot easier after deliverance without those demonic spirits involved, right?
Well, that's it. And after deliverance, especially, we have to be prepared. The Bible says for when the spirits try to come back to the house, because the devils are going to try to return, and it's a matter of the battlefield is the mind. So being able to do that, we've had podcasts on that and other topics on that, but the whole realm is being able to discern and resist these spirits, including the spirit of depression, when it comes back to the house. And so that's an important part of the equation. Any key takeaways or anything finally you'd like to?
Well,
to
I just think that
folks?
I think that God is faithful, you know, and for every woe, He always provides a deliverer. And so through this, I think we've kind of unearthed that depression has a lot of feeder lines that come into it. You know, it's a lot of spirits are involved with it. A lot of things are involved with it. And if you come in and you can go through deliverance, then you'll be able to get that freedom and start to work on a lot of the other life issues that perhaps are still very evident in your life. But, you know, God is faithful. He has given us a way and a way out for the body of Christ.
Well, then it is. And I would just add to that it's one thing to get delivered and you get relieved from the spirits, and then the mind is the battlefield. And when the thoughts come, you're better able to resist those thoughts and take them captive. And yes, you know, that's where counseling, you can act on counseling. People can need to start walking on the path that God has for them, and maybe making him proper boundaries and good decisions in the natural.
Yes.
If bad things are happening in your life, and to the extent you can, you need to fix those.
That's right.
And you need to take and do those things. And sometimes just for people moving on a path and knowing they're doing the right things can help.
Exactly.
With that process. And that's where counseling can help. But you're able to act on the counsel and win those mind battles and do the things when the demonic torment is gone. And that's why we always encourage people, look, if you've got a battle with this, you try with depression, and you haven't gotten the victory, then gosh, consider deliverance. I mean, find a good competent deliverance ministry somewhere. Get some help in the spirit realm. If you want, contact us. You've got our information there. We'd be happy to work with you. But the important thing is getting free and letting know that there's hope.
Amen.
You know, it's just not something God's put on you, that you can be free. And that's why Jesus came, was to set the captives free.
He did.
And that's one of them. So. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We would love to hear from you. We enjoy the feedback that we are getting from folks. And in fact, I got one just recently, I appreciate so much, from a listener who said, you know, Dr. Don, you talk a lot. You talk very fast. And I have been clocked at 300 or 400 words a minute with gusts up to 600. Ooh, so I know I can talk quickly. So that's why even today I've tried to consciously focus on talking more slowly and making it clear, because we want you to understand this clearly. And we appreciate the comments we've gotten, ideas for topics. Go to our website at andbcounseling.com. You'll see a tab there, or a way to get to deliveranceministry.fm. That's our iTunes station, if you like. And if you leave a review for us on iTunes, we'll send you a free gift. So there's information on how to do that there. We would very much appreciate if you would leave a review and post a review for us on iTunes. One other bit of information, if you want to get access to a lot of our free resources in terms of articles and blogs that we've written, podcasts like this and others, PowerPoints, YouTube videos, sign up for our resource library. It's completely free, and you can find tabs for that on the A&B Counseling website. .com website, and also on the Academy. Just look under resources, sign up. It's totally free.
It's an awesome resource.
It is. We put everything in one place, try to make it easy, and we're going to continue to add to it. So hope you've enjoyed this. Once again, please keep in touch with us. We appreciate you very much. We appreciate the feedback that we're getting, and we want to just continue to hopefully bring good content to you. So thank you for listening. God bless you.